Mike Tyson, at the seasoned age of 52, stood as a towering enigma in the cutthroat world of luxury jewelry. A man of few words and even fewer public sightings, he'd forged an empire from the gritty streets of Chicago, not the polished avenues of New York. His name echoed through the elite corridors of the trade, whispered in awe and fear, yet the man himself was a phantom, elusive, untouchable, a shadow lurking behind the dazzling storefronts of Tyson Jewel Co. Precision was his weapon, discretion his shield, and ruthless efficiency his creed. To the outside world, his boardroom suits and high-flying executives seemed to run the show, but that was a lie they all swallowed. Mike Tyson was the puppet master, orchestrating every deal, every takeover, every gleaming expansion from a hidden perch atop his Windy City fortress. No one, not the slickest dealmaker, not his closest confidants, had ever glimpsed his face. It was a privilege rarer than the diamonds he peddled, and to some, a curse that fueled wild tales. Was he a myth spun by rivals? A legend born from the underworld? To Mike, he was just a businessman, cold, calculating, and damn good at what he did. His penthouse office, a sleek eagle's nest overlooking Chicago's restless skyline, mirrored his soul. Minimalist, private, and pulsing with unspoken power. Tonight, though, something darker loomed. A storm was brewing, and Mike Tyson sensed it in his bones. Trouble that could topple his empire in a heartbeat. Mike Tyson sat alone in his Chicago penthouse, the city's jagged skyline sprawling beneath him like a battlefield waiting to erupt. The soft glow of his triple monitor setup bathed the room in an eerie, ghostly light, casting sharp shadows across his chiseled face. At 52, he'd seen plenty, deals gone sour, rivals crushed underfoot. But nothing like this. His empire, Tyson Jewel Co., was a fortress built on precision, and tonight, that precision had been stabbed in the back. A single financial report lay open on his desk, its pages crisp and damning. The numbers didn't lie, but someone had tried to make them. A discrepancy, small at first, a flicker in the millions flowing through his downtown Chicago branch, had caught his hawk-like gaze. Most would have shrugged it off as a clerical glitch, but Mike wasn't most. He'd clawed his way up from nothing, and he knew a snake when he smelled one. This wasn't a mistake, it was a heist, and it reeked of betrayal. His fingers pressed together, knuckles whitening as he scanned the figures again. The gap wasn't trivial anymore. It was a gaping wound, a cool $2.7 million unaccounted for. Embezzlement? Negligence? Either way, heads would roll and Mike would swing the axe himself. His mind zeroed in on one name, Karen Voss, the deputy director of the downtown branch. She was sharp, ambitious, a 5-year veteran who'd climbed the ranks with a smile that could charm a shark. On paper, she was gold, efficient, respected, untouchable. But Mike had heard the whispers trickling up from the streets. Late-night meetings, unexplained cash flows, a glint in her eye that didn't match her polished resume. He'd ignored the rumors at first. Gossip was cheap in this game, but this report was the smoking gun. Karen ran the branch that handled Tyson Jewel's crown jewels. Rare, obscenely expensive gemstones sourced from the black markets of Bangkok to the mines of Sierra Leone. She held trust in her manicured hands, and now Mike's gut screamed she'd crushed it. He leaned forward, the leather chair creaking under his weight, his breath slow and deliberate. This wasn't just about money. It was personal. Someone had dared to stab him in the back, thinking he wouldn't notice, thinking they could outsmart the ghost of Chicago's jewelry underworld. Karen Voss wasn't just a suspect. She was the key to unraveling this mess. But confronting her outright? No, that wasn't Mike's style. He thrived in the shadows, a predator who struck when least expected. To face her head-on would mean stepping into the light, exposing the man behind the myth. And that was a risk he'd never take. Not yet. His mind raced, plotting a move as sharp as a switchblade. He'd dig deeper, silent and unseen, peeling back the layers of Karen's perfect facade. Was she a lone wolf, siphoning cash for her own greed? Or was she a pawn in something bigger, a web of corruption stretching beyond the downtown branch? Mike's eyes narrowed, the city lights flickering below like a warning. He'd built this empire brick by bloody brick, and no one was going to tear it down. But the clock was ticking, and every second he waited, the snake slithered closer to escape. Here's where you come in, folks. This is just the beginning of Mike Tyson's war. If you're hooked on this high-stakes showdown, drop a 1 in the comments and smash that subscribe button to catch the next twist. Want to see Mike take Karen down or uncover a conspiracy that'll blow your mind? Tell me what you're betting on below. I'm reading every word. If it's not your vibe, hit that like button anyway and let me know why. The shadows are deepening, and trust me, you won't believe what's coming next. Stay tuned. The Chicago wind howled outside Mike Tyson's penthouse, a restless beast clawing at the glass as he paced the room, his shadow stretching long and jagged across the polished floor. The financial report still burned in his mind. $2.7 million missing, a betrayal carved in cold numbers. Karen Voss, the deputy director of the downtown branch, wasn't just a name on a payroll anymore. She was a ticking bomb, and Mike needed to defuse her before she blew his empire to hell. He couldn't trust the suits in the boardroom or the whispers from the streets. He'd handle this his way, the only way he knew. Silent, sharp, and unseen. Confronting her directly was out of the question. The ghost of Tyson Jewel Co didn't show his face, not even to slit a throat. No, he'd go undercover, slip into her world like a blade through silk, and watch her hang herself. The plan crystallized in the early hours as the city slept below. Mike would become someone else. A wealthy buyer, a nobody with deep pockets and a taste for the rare gems Karen controlled. He'd walk into her downtown Chicago store, a predator in plain sight, and peel back the layers of her deception. Every move had to be perfect. One slip and she'd bolt, or worse, turn the tables. He spent the morning prepping, ditching the sleek suits for something less conspicuous. A dark, slightly worn jacket, a pair of aviators to mask his eyes, and a tousled mess of hair that screamed money but not menace. His driver, Marcus, a stoic wall of a man, didn't ask questions as he pulled the black sedan up to the curb a block from the store. "Wait here," Mike growled, stepping into the biting wind. The downtown branch glittered like a jewel itself, nestled between skyscrapers and boutique facades, its windows dripping with diamonds and sapphires that caught the midday sun. Inside, the air was thick with wealth. Soft jazz hummed, the scent of oud and leather lingered, and the displays screamed exclusivity. Karen Voss stood behind the counter, tall and poised, her late-30s frame wrapped in a tailored blazer that couldn't hide the edge in her posture. She flicked her eyes up as Mike entered, sizing him up in a heartbeat. Another rich mark, she'd think. Perfect. His pulse stayed steady, a hunter's calm as he approached. "Afternoon," he said, voice smooth as gravel over glass. "I'm in the market for something rare, real rare." Karen's smile was tight, practiced, but Mike caught the flicker, a glint of greed, a twitch of nerves. "You've come to the right place, sir," she purred, stepping closer, her heels clicking like a countdown. She didn't know it yet, but she was already in his trap. He asked about a set of Burmese rubies, stones he knew she'd tampered with, according to the intel he'd pieced together. Her fingers brushed the case, lingering too long, and Mike's gut tightened. She was good, damn good, but not good enough. "These are one of a kind," she said, her tone too smooth, too rehearsed. "How much are you looking to spend?" He leaned in, close enough to smell her expensive perfume, close enough to see the pulse jump in her neck. "Enough to make it worth your while," he replied, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Her eyes gleamed. Greed, yes, but something darker too. Fear? Guilt? Mike didn't care. He'd baited the hook, and she was biting. Every word, every gesture was a thread he'd pull until her whole damn web unraveled. The game was on, and Karen Voss didn't stand a chance. Not against Mike Tyson, not today. The air inside the downtown Chicago jewelry store crackled with tension as Mike Tyson stood across from Karen Voss, the glass counter between them a fragile barrier in a war she didn't even know she'd stepped into. He'd come in disguise, a wealthy buyer, shades low, voice steady, but the stakes were sky high, and every second ticked like a bomb. The Burmese rubies gleamed under the lights, their blood-red facets a silent witness to the showdown unfolding. Mike had baited her with questions, probing her knowledge, testing her nerve, and she'd played along like a pro. Too smooth, too polished, until now. He'd seen the cracks, the way her fingers twitched, the flicker of unease in her hazel eyes. She was hiding something big, and he was about to rip it wide open. "These rubies," Mike said, leaning closer, his shadow falling over the case. "They're flawless. Almost too good to be true. You get a lot of buyers for stuff this rare?" His tone was casual, but the edge was razor-sharp, a blade disguised as small talk. Karen's smile tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Oh, we have our regulars," she replied, voice silky but strained. "People who know quality when they see it." She met his gaze, bold, defiant. But then it happened. Her mask slipped. "Or maybe you're just another wannabe big shot," she snapped, her tone shifting from honey to venom in a heartbeat. "Think you can waltz in here, flash some cash, and own the place? You're all the same." Mike froze, his pulse spiking, though his face stayed stone cold. This wasn't just a slip-up. It was a damn eruption. Her words dripped with contempt, but beneath it, something raw broke through. Anger, fear, a cornered animal lashing out. She didn't know who he was, couldn't know, yet she'd just handed him the keys to her guilt. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, slow and deliberate, letting the silence stretch like a noose. "I'm just here to shop." But inside, his mind raced. This wasn't about him, not yet. It was about her. She was unraveling, and he'd barely pushed. Karen stepped closer, her heels stabbing the floor, her eyes blazing. "Don't play dumb with me," she hissed, voice low but lethal. "You think I don't see through guys like you? Coming in here, acting like you run the show? I know what's really going on. Years of this crap, and I'm done taking it." Her hands trembled, betraying her bravado, and Mike saw it all. The desperation, the paranoia, the weight of her crimes crashing down. She thought he was some rival, some outsider sniffing around her scheme. She had no idea he was Mike Tyson, the man she'd robbed blind. He held her stare, unblinking, letting her words hang in the air like smoke after a gunshot. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a confession, raw and unfiltered. Karen Voss had cracked wide open, and Mike had her dead to rights. The trap was set, and she'd walked right into it. Now it was time to tighten the screws. Mike Tyson stepped out of the downtown Chicago jewelry store into the biting wind, his aviators shielding the storm brewing in his eyes. Karen Voss's venomous outburst still echoed in his skull. Her words, a Molotov cocktail of defiance and guilt, igniting a fire he couldn't ignore. She'd spilled more than she realized. Her raw, unhinged rant confirming she wasn't just skimming cash. She was drowning in something bigger, something that reached beyond her manicured claws. 2.7 million didn't vanish by accident, and her cornered animal snarl told him she wasn't alone in this heist. Mike's empire, Tyson Jewel Co, was under siege, and he'd be damned if he let it bleed out without a fight. The shadows were his domain, and he'd hunt down every last thread of this conspiracy, no matter how high it climbed. Back in his penthouse, the city's restless pulse thrummed below as he dialed Jerry Malone, his old war dog from the corporate trenches. Jerry wasn't just a friend. He was a bloodhound, a master of digging up dirt where others saw only polished surfaces. The phone crackled to life. "Mike, what's the play?" Jerry's gravelly voice cut through the static, sharp and ready. "Karen Voss," Mike said, pacing the sleek office, his shadow slicing the walls. "She's not solo. That 2.7 million, it's got fingerprints, and I need names. Start with the downtown branch. Investors, partners, anyone with a stake. Dig deep, Jerry. I want the whole damn web." Jerry didn't flinch. "You think it's bigger than her?" he asked, already typing on the other end. "I know it is," Mike shot back, his voice a low growl. "She's a cog, not the machine. Someone's pulling strings and they're laughing while my empire burns." The line went quiet for a beat. Then Jerry grunted. "Give me 48 hours. If there's a rat, I'll sniff it out." The call ended, and Mike stared at the skyline, the lights flickering like a warning. He wasn't just fighting Karen now. He was up against a hydra, and every head he'd cut off would sprout two more. Hours bled into night as Mike pored over the branch's records, cross-referencing deals, shipments, anything that smelled off. Then, Jerry's call hit like a thunderclap. "Mike, you're not going to like this," Jerry said, his tone heavy. "Two big shots, Vincent Russo and Paul Decker, top investors, have their hands all over the downtown books. Shell companies, fake invoices, the works. They've been funneling cash through Karen's branch for months. Millions, Mike. This ain't petty theft. It's a goddamn operation." Mike's fists clenched, knuckles whitening. Russo and Decker, pillars of Chicago's elite, men he'd shaken hands with at galas, men he'd trusted with his vision. Now they were vipers in his nest. The betrayal cut deep, but the rage burned hotter. Karen was the front, the fall guy, but Russo and Decker were the architects. Mike's mind raced. How far did this go? Was it just them? Or was the rot eating through his entire board? He slammed a fist on the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. This wasn't over. He'd tear their world apart, brick by brick, until every traitor bled for what they'd done. The war had just begun. The Chicago skyline loomed like a jagged crown outside Mike Tyson's penthouse, but inside, the air was thick with the stench of betrayal. Vincent Russo and Paul Decker, two titans of Tyson Jewel Co's investor circle, had been unmasked by Jerry Malone's relentless digging, their fingerprints smeared across a $2.7 million embezzlement scheme. Karen Voss was the face, the fall guy, but these bastards were the brains, siphoning cash through fake invoices and shell companies right under Mike's nose. The rage in his chest was a furnace, but he didn't pace or shout. He sat still, a predator plotting the kill. This wasn't just business anymore, it was war, and Mike was about to bring the fight to their doorstep. He summoned them to the boardroom of his Chicago headquarters, a sleek, glass-walled arena perched atop the city. The call was curt, his voice ice-cold. "Be there. Noon. Don't test me." They'd show, arrogant enough to think they could bluff their way out. When the clock struck 12, Mike strode in, his dark suit sharp as a blade, his aviators gone, revealing eyes that burned with controlled fury. Russo, a wiry man with slick gray hair, sat stiffly, while Decker, broad and bull-necked, slouched with a smirk. Two other investors flanked them, silent, sweating pawns in this deadly chess game. The room crackled with tension, the glass walls reflecting their fear like a mirror. "You've been busy," Mike started, his voice low, lethal, as he tossed a stack of damning documents onto the table. Transaction logs, emails, proof of their treachery. $2.7 million doesn't just vanish. You thought you could bleed me dry and I'd never notice? Russo shifted, his thin lips twitching. "Mike, you've got this all wrong," he began, but Mike cut him off, slamming a fist down, the sound a gunshot in the silence. "Don't lie to me," he roared, leaning forward, his shadow swallowing them. "I've got everything, your shell companies, your payouts to Karen Voss. You're done." Decker's smirk faded, his fists clenching. "You've got no proof that'll hold up," he growled, standing, his bulk towering. "We're untouchable, Tyson. You're a dead man walking if you push this." Mike didn't flinch. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "Untouchable? I've crushed bigger men than you. The law's got your names now. Cops, feds, the whole damn system. You're not walking out of this." Russo paled, his bravado crumbling, while Decker's face reddened, a bull ready to charge. But he froze under Mike's gaze, a predator staring down prey. "You've got one chance," Mike said, his words a guillotine blade. "Confess, cooperate, and maybe you see daylight again. Fight me, and I'll bury you so deep your grandkids won't find the pieces." The room was a tomb, their breaths shallow, their empires teetering. Mike turned to leave, the trap sprung, the war declared. They'd crumble, or they'd burn. Hey folks, this showdown's heating up. If Mike's ice-cold justice has you on edge, drop a 1 in the comments and hit subscribe. We're just getting started. Think Russo and Decker will crack or swing back? Guess below. I'm watching. Not feeling it? Smash that like anyway and tell me why. Next time the gloves come off, will Mike's empire stand or fall? You won't want to miss it. The boardroom doors slammed shut behind Mike Tyson, the echo reverberating through the glass walls as he left Vincent Russo, Paul Decker, and their cronies trembling in their tailored suits. Chicago's skyline glared through the windows, a cold witness to the reckoning he'd just unleashed. The investors were cornered. $2.7 million in dirty money tied to their names, Karen Voss in custody, and the feds circling like vultures. Mike had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The empire he'd built, Tyson Jewel Co, teetered on a razor's edge, its polished facade cracking under the weight of scandal. Victory tasted bitter, laced with the ashes of trust burned to the ground. Back in his penthouse, the city's pulse throbbed below, but the silence up here was suffocating. Mike stood at the window, hands clasped behind him, staring at the lights that once symbolized his dominance. Now they mocked him. The arrests hit the news like a thunderclap. Karen Voss, handcuffed and snarling, Russo and Decker hauled off in unmarked cars, their smug faces plastered across every screen in Chicago. The public cheered at first, hailing Mike as a crusader against corruption, but the tide turned fast. Whispers slithered through the streets. Did he know? Was he in on it? Employees who'd once nodded in respect now averted their eyes, their loyalty replaced by doubt. Clients pulled contracts, millions hemorrhaging overnight. The empire wasn't just bleeding, it was on life support. Mike's phone buzzed, shattering the stillness. It was Janet, his assistant, her voice tight. Mr. Tyson, the board's panicking. They're calling it a PR nightmare, stocks tanking, and there's talk of lawsuits. Your name's taking hits you can't dodge. He clenched his jaw, the muscles twitching. Let 'em talk, he growled. I saved this company. They'll see that. But even he heard the hollowness in his words. The truth was a double-edged sword. He'd exposed the rot, but the stench clung to him too. Russo and Decker weren't going quietly. Their lawyers were already spinning tales, painting Mike as the puppet master who'd turned a blind eye until it suited him to strike. He sank into his leather chair, the financial reports a grim battlefield before him. Rebuilding wasn't just about money. It was about trust, and that was a currency he'd lost. The downtown branch, once a jewel in his crown, was a crime scene now, cordoned off with yellow tape. Karen's betrayal had been the spark, but Russo and Decker had fanned the flames, and Mike's own people were caught in the blaze. He'd fought for them, bled for them, and now they questioned him. The isolation was a vice around his chest, tightening with every headline, every sidelong glance. But Mike Tyson didn't bend. He stood, fists balled, staring down the city he'd conquered once before. This wasn't the end. It was a crucible. He'd rebuild, brick by brick, purging the weak, forging something unbreakable. The doubters would see, the traitors would pay, and the empire would rise again, stronger, fiercer. The storm had broken him open, but it wouldn't bury him. Not yet. The Chicago wind screamed past Mike Tyson's penthouse, rattling the windows as he stood alone, a silhouette against the city's jagged glow. Tyson Jewel Co was a wounded giant, its veins torn open by the arrests of Karen Voss, Vincent Russo, and Paul Decker. The feds had swooped in, the media had feasted, and Mike had emerged from the shadows to claim victory, but at what cost? The empire he'd forged from nothing was crumbling, not from the thieves he'd crushed, but from the fallout he couldn't control. Doubt festered like a plague. Employees whispering, shareholders fleeing, the press sharpening their knives. Tonight, though, Mike wasn't hiding. Tonight, he'd face the storm head-on. The press conference loomed, a gauntlet of lights and microphones set for dawn at the Chicago Tribune's plaza. Janet had warned him. They'll tear you apart, Mr. Tyson. The rumors are wildfire. People think you knew, that you're dirty too. Mike's response was steel. Let 'em try. I've got the truth, and I'll ram it down their throats. He'd spent the night pacing, scripting every word, knowing this was his last stand to reclaim the narrative. The city didn't sleep, and neither did he. His reflection in the glass showed a man hardened by betrayal, eyes burning with defiance. This wasn't just about saving his company. It was about proving who he was. Morning broke gray and brutal, the plaza swarming with reporters like sharks scenting blood. Mike stepped onto the stage, his dark suit of battle armor, the wind tugging at his coat as cameras flashed. The crowd hushed, a predatory silence, waiting for him to bleed. I'm Mike Tyson, he began, voice a low thunder rolling over the mic. I built Tyson Jewel Co from the dirt up, and I've spent weeks tearing out the rot that tried to choke it. Karen Voss, Russo, Decker. They betrayed me. They betrayed you, and I stopped him cold. His gaze swept the sea of faces, daring them to challenge him. You want to know why? Because this company's mine, its soul, its people, and I'll fight to my last breath to protect it. A reporter shouted, What about the rumors, Tyson? Did you know about the money? Mike's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady, cutting like a blade. I didn't know until I dug it up myself. I risked everything to expose it. My name, my legacy. You think I'd let thieves run my house? I'm no puppet. I'm the one who pulled the trigger. The crowd stirred, some nodding, others scribbling furiously. He leaned forward, fists on the podium. This isn't over. The law's got the guilty, but I'm rebuilding. Stronger, cleaner. Anyone who doubts me, step up. I don't back down. He walked off, the roar of questions chasing him. But Mike didn't flinch. The city watched, divided. Hero or villain, savior or fraud. His empire hung by a thread, the war raging on. But he felt the fire reignite. This was his fight, his story, and he'd claw it back from the abyss, no matter the cost. The reckoning wasn't done. It was just beginning.